The flight attendant's voice sliced through the tense silence. "Step to the back now, or I'll have you removed." In that heartbeat, the fragile calm shattered, and the entire cabin braced for the storm that was about to erupt. What happened next shocked everyone and set off a chain of events no one saw coming. Stay with me. This is a story you need to hear. Before we start the story, comment below, and let us know where in the world you're watching from today. And if you find this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe for more. A heavy, rain-soaked dusk draped the tarmac as the old airplane sat silently at Gate 7, its windows glowing like distant eyes in the gloom. The steady drumming of rain against metal and glass created an eerie symphony, and the soft hum of the engines whispered secrets of journeys yet to be told. In that moment, the airport became a stage for a drama written in the language of shadows and light, where every drop of rain and every flicker of a neon sign held meaning beyond the ordinary. Inside the plane, the cabin was a world unto itself. The dim overhead lights gave everything a soft, melancholic glow. Aisha moved gracefully down the narrow aisle, checking seat belts and offering gentle smiles that belied the intensity of her inner thoughts. Tonight, something in the air was different, a subtle charge that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She had flown hundreds of times before, but this flight felt like the calm before an unexpected storm. Seated near the window was Imran, a man whose presence seemed to disrupt the delicate balance of the cabin. His eyes flickered with a mix of arrogance and impatience as he glared at the other passengers and occasionally muttered under his breath. His behavior had been a quiet nuisance at first, but now it was clear that his attitude was more than just a momentary lapse in decorum. Aisha had noticed him as soon as she stepped on board, a solitary figure whose restless energy hinted at something far more dangerous than mere rudeness. The murmur of conversations, the rustle of magazines, and the soft clink of cutlery in the service cart were all part of the flight's lullaby. Yet beneath that hum lay an undercurrent of tension, as if the plane itself sensed the brewing conflict. Aisha's eyes met Imran's briefly, and in that fleeting exchange, unspoken words passed between them. It was as if the universe had conspired to set the stage for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of their routine lives. Outside, the world was a blur of rain and dark silhouettes. The city lights in the distance pulsed with an almost hypnotic rhythm, mirroring the rapid beating of Aisha's heart. Every element of that night seemed charged with possibility, a cryptic promise of change. As Aisha continued her checks, her thoughts wandered to memories of past flights where moments of quiet bravery had altered the course of lives. Tonight, she felt a familiar stirring, a deep-rooted determination to protect the sanctity of her duty, no matter what challenges might arise. Imran, however, seemed oblivious to the silent warning in Aisha's eyes. He reclined in his seat with an air of self-importance, his gaze fixed on a point beyond the window, as though he could see into another world. A world where rules were meant to be broken and consequences merely suggestions. The tension between his defiant posture and the tranquil environment around him created a striking contrast, like a discordant note in an otherwise harmonious melody. In the soft glow of the cabin light, every detail took on heightened significance. The subtle creak of a seat, the distant murmur of the engines, and even the faint aroma of coffee mingling with the sterile scent of recycled air contributed to the building's sense of unease. Aisha's mind raced with a million possibilities, each one a different thread in the tapestry of fate that was unfolding before her eyes. She could almost hear the whispers of the past mingling with the pulse of the present, urging her to remain vigilant. The passengers, unaware of the storm that was quietly brewing, settled into their seats. Some were lost in thought, others immersed in books or devices, and a few exchanged polite smiles. Yet there was an undeniable weight in the air, a feeling that nothing was quite as it seemed. The flight had begun as any other, but the subtle interplay of glances and gestures hinted that tonight would not follow the expected script. Aisha took a moment to center herself, drawing a deep breath as she glanced out of the small window at the rain-swept runway. The plane was more than just a vessel for travel. It was a microcosm of life itself, with its unpredictable encounters and hidden dramas. She thought of the countless flights that had carried dreams, fears, hopes, and regrets, all woven together in the fabric of human experience. And now, as she looked into the eyes of Imran, she sensed that their encounter was destined to become one of those unforgettable moments. The soft, rhythmic tapping of the rain outside gradually merged with the internal hum of the cabin, creating a strange lullaby that spoke of both comfort and imminent peril. In that delicate balance, the themes of control and rebellion, duty and defiance began to take shape. Aisha was the guardian of order in a world that sometimes teetered on the edge of chaos, while Imran embodied a rebellious spirit that defied the norms, challenging the quiet authority that maintained peace in the confined space of the aircraft. As the minutes ticked by, every second seemed to stretch into an eternity. The plane, though firmly planted on the runway, felt as though it were suspended in time, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. Aisha's thoughts drifted to her own past, to moments when she had stood firm in the face of adversity, guided by an unshakable sense of purpose. That inner resolve, tempered by years of experience and quiet courage, was her shield against the unpredictable tides of fate. Imran, meanwhile, shifted in his seat, his restless energy growing palpable. He tapped his fingers on the armrest, his eyes darting around as if he were searching for something, an escape, a challenge, or perhaps a way to assert his will over the rigid order of the flight. His silent rebellion was a stark contrast to the calm exterior he tried to project, and Aisha couldn't help but wonder what inner demons drove him to such a state. The atmosphere in the cabin was thick with anticipation. Each passenger, in their own quiet way, sensed that something extraordinary was about to happen. The ordinary rituals of boarding and settling in had been transformed into a prelude to an event that promised to upend the routine of daily life. Aisha's steady hands and composed demeanor were a testament to the unspoken pact she had with the world, one that demanded resilience and unwavering commitment in the face of the unexpected. In that suspended moment, where time itself seemed to hold its breath, the stage was set. The interplay of light and shadow, the convergence of silent defiance and gentle duty, all pointed to an impending confrontation. The flight was no longer just a means of transport. It had become a battleground for ideals, a canvas upon which the clash of personalities would leave indelible marks. Aisha's eyes remained locked on the horizon, where the dark sky met the scattered lights of the city. In her heart, she carried the weight of countless flights and the silent promise that no matter how turbulent the skies, order and compassion would always find a way to prevail. And as she moved gracefully among the passengers, her presence was a quiet reminder that even in the midst of discord, there was always the possibility of redemption and understanding. Little did anyone know that within a few short minutes, the delicate balance of power within the cabin would shatter, giving rise to events that none could have foreseen. For now, though, the rain continued its steady pattern, the engines murmured a lullaby of distant lands, and the quiet determination of Aisha stood as a beacon against the encroaching darkness. The night was young, the journey long, and every heartbeat echoed with the promise of change, a change that would soon sweep through the cabin like a tempest, leaving nothing untouched in its wake. Aisha moved down the narrow aisle with gentle precision, her warm smile an unspoken promise of comfort to every soul on board. Her calm eyes, deep with experience, scanned the cabin as if reading the hidden stories of each passenger. For Aisha, every flight was more than a routine duty. It was a chance to touch lives, to bring a small measure of peace to those burdened by the weight of their own journeys. Born into a modest family where every day was a lesson in resilience, she had learned early that kindness was the strongest armor against life storms. Tonight, as the soft hum of the plane's engines blended with the distant patter of rain, her heart beat with a quiet determination. She had a mission: to guide this flight safely through the night, ensuring that every traveler felt seen and cared for, even when shadows threatened to dim the light of hope. In one corner of the cabin sat Imran, a man whose presence was as unpredictable as the weather outside. His eyes, dark and flickering with defiance, betrayed a restless spirit. Unlike Aisha's steady calm, Imran carried an air of quiet rebellion. His face, set in a perpetual scowl, often softened for just a moment when a memory of better days surfaced, a fleeting glimpse of vulnerability that he fought hard to conceal. Imran had built a persona that repelled authority, a barrier against a world that had long misunderstood him. He had seen injustice up close and had learned to fight back in the only way he knew how, by challenging every rule and every gentle order that tried to tether him down. Throughout the cabin, the passengers carried on with their quiet conversations and private reflections, unaware of the silent drama unfolding between these two very different souls. Aisha moved gracefully from seat to seat, her presence a soothing balm amid the tense undercurrents. Mrs. Khan, an elderly woman with trembling hands and a gentle smile, found comfort in Aisha's soft words and reassuring nods. Young Rahim, lost in thought with his eyes fixed on a small toy, seemed momentarily uplifted by the tender care that Aisha effortlessly provided. Each interaction, however brief, underscored Aisha's belief that even in the fleeting confines of an airplane cabin, every gesture of kindness could create a ripple of change. Aisha's inner world was a tapestry woven with threads of duty, empathy, and personal sacrifice. Her goal was clear: to maintain the serene order of the flight, to be a guiding light in the midst of inevitable turbulence, both in the skies and in the hearts of those around her. She remembered the long nights of her youth, when life's harsh realities taught her that a single act of compassion could be the difference between despair and hope. That belief now propelled her forward, even as she sensed an undercurrent of unrest building in the form of one particularly defiant passenger. Imran, though silent most of the time, was a storm of inner conflict. He projected an image of arrogance and restlessness, but beneath that veneer lay layers of hurt and disillusionment. Every rigid rule and every polite request from the cabin crew felt like another reminder of the society that had failed him. His defiance was not born solely out of a desire to cause trouble. It was also a desperate plea for recognition, a way to assert his individuality in a world that prized conformity over authenticity. Imran's life had been a series of battles fought on uneven ground. Each scar he bore was a testament to the times he had been knocked down by forces far larger than himself. Yet, even as he embraced his role as a disruptor, there was a flicker of regret, a silent acknowledgement that his rebellion might be a barrier keeping him from finding a path to redemption. As the minutes slipped by and the flight continued its journey through rain and darkness, a subtle interplay of emotions began to shape the atmosphere. Aisha's warm presence and unwavering commitment created a safe haven for the passengers, a small oasis of order in the chaos of everyday life. She had long mastered the art of balancing empathy with firmness, knowing that sometimes maintaining peace required standing up to those who threatened it. With each kind word and every carefully executed task, she reinforced her belief that every individual deserved a moment of calm. Even in the midst of uncertainty, Imran, on the other hand, became more animated as the cabin's tension grew. His restless energy was palpable, a silent protest against the imposed order. He shifted in his seat, his gaze darting from one end of the cabin to the other, as if searching for an outlet for his simmering anger. Every casual glance and every whispered comment from nearby passengers fed into the storm within him. Despite his outward defiance, there was a part of Imran that silently questioned whether this constant battle was leading him anywhere constructive. The memories of lost opportunities and moments of fleeting happiness haunted him, reminding him of a time when he had dared to hope for a different future. In the quiet spaces between the routine checks and small exchanges of pleasantries, an unspoken tension built between Aisha and Imran. Their eyes met in passing, each encounter a silent duel of wills. For Aisha, every interaction was a chance to extend compassion, to offer a lifeline to someone adrift in the vast sea of life's uncertainties. Her motivation sprang from a deep-seated belief that order and kindness could coexist, that even the most troubled souls deserved a second chance. She knew that maintaining the flight's serene balance was not merely about following procedures. It was about connecting with people at their most vulnerable, about reminding them that amidst the turbulence of life, there was always a promise of safe passage. Imran, in his own way, was fighting a similar battle. His inner turmoil was a blend of anger and sorrow, a rebellion against the injustices he had faced, coupled with a hidden yearning for something more meaningful. Every act of defiance was a step towards reclaiming control over a life that had often felt dictated by forces beyond his control. Yet, even as he reveled in his outward rebellion, there was an unspoken part of him that longed to break free from the cycle of self-destruction. The cabin, with its enforced order and fleeting moments of beauty, stood as a stark contrast to the chaotic world he was so familiar with. Between the gentle order of Aisha and the simmering chaos of Imran, the airplane became a microcosm of the broader struggle between structure and anarchy, between compassion and defiance. Aisha's initial goal, to secure a peaceful journey for everyone on board, was clear in every careful step she took. Yet, the presence of Imran, with his turbulent energy and silent protests, hinted at the challenges that lay ahead. Their conflicting motivations, like two sides of a coin, promised a collision of ideals that would test the strength of both their characters. In the unfolding, quiet drama of the cabin, every small gesture carried immense weight. Aisha's soft words and reassuring smiles were not just routine acts. They were expressions of a deeper conviction that every life was worth safeguarding. Her commitment was personal, forged in the fires of past hardships and illuminated by the hope that kindness could indeed conquer even the darkest of moments. Imran, with his guarded demeanor and defiant glances, embodied the struggle against a system that had repeatedly let him down. His every movement, every challenge to the established order was an assertion of his desire to break free from the invisible chains that bound him to a life of disappointment. As the flight sailed on through the rain-drenched night, the seeds of an inevitable confrontation were being sown. Aisha's quiet determination and gentle authority clashed with Imran's unyielding defiance, setting the stage for a drama that promised to shake the very foundations of their carefully maintained worlds. In that confined space, where the mundane met the extraordinary, two very different lives were about to collide. A meeting that would force each of them to confront their innermost fears and perhaps, in the process, discover a sliver of redemption in the unexpected union of order and chaos. Rain hammered relentlessly against the plane's exterior as the calm before the storm began to unravel inside. For most passengers, the steady hum of the engines had been a soothing lullaby, but for Aisha, the atmosphere shifted suddenly, a palpable tension now layered over the familiar routine. In a moment that felt like a tremor in an otherwise placid world, Imran's simmering defiance erupted. A low murmur, barely noticeable at first, swelled into harsh, disruptive words that cut through the murmurs of the cabin. Imran's eyes burned with anger as he launched into a tirade aimed at a fellow traveler over something trivial. His voice, rough and unyielding, clashed with the gentle murmur of polite conversation. The quiet order of the flight shattered as passengers exchanged startled glances and hushed whispers. Aisha, who had long maintained the delicate balance of order and care aboard, felt a cold knot of apprehension tighten in her stomach. This was no ordinary outburst. It was the spark that would soon ignite a much larger conflagration. She moved swiftly through the aisle, her calm determination belying the turmoil within. Her every step was measured, yet the urgency of the moment quickened her pace. "Sir, please lower your voice and calm down," she said softly at first, then with increasing firmness. Her words, meant to restore balance, instead only fanned the flames of Imran's rebellion. He sneered, dismissing her request with a dismissive wave of his hand, his defiant posture signaling that he would not be cowed by gentle authority. The situation escalated rapidly. His face twisted in anger, and in a flash of heated impulse, he shoved the passenger aside with such force that it sent the individual reeling. The action reverberated through the narrow cabin like a shockwave. The murmur of uneasy conversations fell silent, replaced by an expectant stillness as everyone braced for what might come next. Aisha's heart pounded in her ears as she stepped closer, her eyes locked on Imran. The charged air around them was almost tangible, a mix of rain-dampened anxiety and the impending clash of wills. In that moment, she understood that this incident was not just about a single act of aggression, it was a portent of deeper conflicts brewing beneath the surface. Her mind raced, weighing her responsibility to restore peace against the possibility that this was merely the beginning of something far more tumultuous. "Sir, you need to calm down now," she said once more, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within. Imran's reply was a bitter laugh, his eyes glinting with unspoken challenges. With one swift motion that stunned everyone into silence, Aisha's hand connected with his chest in a decisive, controlled shove. The impact, though not meant to cause harm, was firm enough to force him to stagger backward. For an instant, the cabin was frozen in a suspended heartbeat, a moment when the line between order and chaos blurred irrevocably. Outside the window, lightning split the dark sky, its sudden brilliance a mirror to the internal flash of confrontation. The sound of thunder roared in time with the pounding of Aisha's heart, as if nature itself had signaled that this was a turning point. The incident, small in the scale of a single flight, suddenly carried the weight of destiny. Aisha's action, born out of necessity, marked her first step into a maelstrom of challenges that she had never anticipated. In the ensuing moments, as Imran struggled to regain his footing, his face contorted with a mixture of shock and fierce determination. His eyes, now even more defiant, met Aisha's with a silent promise, a promise that this was not the end, but merely the opening salvo in a conflict that would test them both. The other passengers watched in a mix of fear and awe, sensing that the familiar confines of the airplane had transformed into a stage for something much larger than a simple altercation. Aisha, steadying herself against the rush of adrenaline, felt an unsettling premonition. The disturbance was not just an isolated incident of personal defiance. It was a symptom of a deeper systemic discord. Every ripple in the cabin, every unsettled gaze, hinted at hidden fractures in the delicate fabric of order. The friendly smiles and quiet conversations that had once defined the atmosphere were replaced by a tension that spoke of impending storms, both within the small space of the flight and in the wider world beyond. As the crew hurried to regain control and calm the anxious passengers, Aisha's thoughts turned inward. She recalled long nights spent on similar flights, moments when minor incidents had escalated unexpectedly, leaving a lingering sense of foreboding. This night, however, felt different. The air seemed charged with an energy that went beyond personal grievances. It was as if the plane had become a microcosm for larger unseen forces, a clash between the need for order and the unpredictable nature of human emotion. In the midst of this turmoil, a quiet undercurrent of mystery began to emerge. Aisha's eyes scanned the faces around her, noting the subtle shifts in expression, the flickers of anxiety mingled with defiance. There was something in the way Imran's eyes danced with a dangerous kind of intensity, something that suggested his rebellion was driven by forces far deeper than simple irritation. His defiance was both personal and symbolic, a reaction not only to the immediate circumstances, but also to a broader disillusionment with a world that often seemed indifferent to the struggles of the individual. The rain outside intensified, each droplet a reminder of the relentless march of time and the inevitability of change. In that sound, a steady, unyielding pattern, the promise of transformation was clear. The incident had broken the calm facade of the flight, exposing raw emotions and unspoken conflicts. It was a disruption that foreshadowed an even greater battle, a struggle between control and chaos, between the measured cadence of duty and the wild unpredictability of the human spirit. As the flight slowly resumed its course, the disruptive event lingered in the minds of all aboard. For some, it was a moment of personal reckoning. For others, a signal that the world was more volatile than it appeared. Aisha, ever vigilant, felt the heavy burden of her role more acutely than ever. She realized that her duty was not simply to smooth over a temporary disturbance, but to confront the underlying currents of anger and despair that threatened to engulf them all. The altercation with Imran had ignited a spark that, if left unchecked, could lead to a blaze of conflict far beyond the confines of the airplane. In the quiet aftermath, as the cabin settled into a tense silence punctuated only by the steady roar of the engines and the relentless drumming of rain, Aisha's mind churned with worry and determination. The confrontation had forced her to recognize that the challenges she faced were not isolated incidents, but part of a larger narrative. A story of clashing ideals, hidden resentments, and the perpetual struggle to find balance in a chaotic world. The seeds of a deeper conflict had been sown on that stormy night, and she could not ignore the nagging feeling that this was only the beginning. Imran's parting glance, filled with an unspoken vow of retribution, echoed in her thoughts long after he had been momentarily subdued by another crew member. It was a look that promised further confrontation, that hinted at a complex web of motives and long-buried grievances waiting to surface. Aisha's heart ached with the realization that she was now on a collision course with forces that extended far beyond a single unruly passenger. The incident, while contained within the narrow confines of the flight, had unveiled a struggle between order and rebellion that resonated on a much grander scale. As the plane continued its journey through the tempestuous night, every flicker of light, every shift in the cabin's mood, served as a reminder that nothing was as it seemed. The disruptive event had peeled back the layers of routine, exposing the raw, untamed emotions beneath. Aisha understood that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, each one a test of her resolve and her ability to navigate the turbulent waters of human conflict. In the interplay of rain, lightning, and the quiet determination of a flight attendant, a larger story was unfolding, a story where the clash of wills would not only determine the fate of a single flight, but also echo the eternal struggle between chaos and order. In that charged moment, as the storm outside raged on and the echoes of confrontation reverberated through the cabin, Aisha felt a deep, unwavering resolve take root within her. She knew that the incident was more than a fleeting disturbance. It was the beginning of a transformative journey that would force her to confront not only the defiant spirit of one man, but also the darker, unspoken forces that threatened to upend the fragile equilibrium of their world. With a steady breath and a determined gaze, she prepared herself to face the coming challenges, aware that every moment from now on would be a battle to restore balance, to protect the vulnerable, and ultimately to reconcile the seemingly irreconcilable forces of order and defiance. The storm outside had not let up, and inside the plane, the tension grew heavier with every passing minute. After the earlier confrontation, the air in the cabin was thick with uncertainty. Aisha moved carefully among the passengers, her eyes darting between calming smiles and the ever-watchful Imran, whose seething defiance still burned beneath the surface. Yet as she attempted to restore a semblance of order, a new disturbance began to unfurl, a subtle shift that would soon challenge everything she had worked to maintain. In the midst of the uneasy silence, a low, crackling voice came over the intercom. The captain's words were measured but urgent, hinting at a technical anomaly in the cockpit. A momentary ripple of worry spread among the crew, and even the restless murmur of discontent from Imran paused, replaced by a collective, anxious gaze toward the ceiling. Aisha felt a chill that wasn't solely from the persistent chill of the storm outside. This was the chill of impending crisis. The captain's announcement was brief, stating that a minor glitch in the autopilot system had been detected and that they were working to resolve it. Still, it was enough to unsettle everyone on board. Aisha's heart pounded as she recognized the gravity of the situation. Her initial goal had always been to keep the flight safe and calm, but now an unexpected technical obstacle threatened to upset that delicate balance. While the crew reassured passengers that everything was under control, Aisha couldn't shake the feeling that the malfunction was only a symptom of a larger, more complicated disturbance, a disturbance that might be exploited by those already pushing the boundaries of order. Among the passengers, an elderly gentleman named Mr. Malik, known for his quiet authority and weathered wisdom, shifted in his seat. His calm, deliberate gaze met Aisha's as if he too sensed that something was amiss. Mr. Malik had often observed life's struggles with a discerning eye, and his presence, though unobtrusive until now, hinted at hidden depths. His eyes, reflecting a past full of battles and hard-won victories, silently offered support to Aisha. In that moment, his subtle nod provided an unspoken promise that he, too, was ready to help restore calm should chaos threaten to overwhelm them. As the murmurs of the cabin slowly resumed, Aisha moved to check on the source of the disquiet among a group of passengers near the galley. She discovered that some travelers were discussing not just the technical issue, but also the recent incident with Imran. Whispers of anger and fear mingled as people speculated whether the disruption was a one-off lapse or a sign of something more sinister brewing. A young mother clutched her child close, her eyes wide with worry, while an older couple exchanged anxious glances. Every face told a story of uncertainty, and each shared glance deepened Aisha's resolve to keep everyone safe. Yet, even as she distributed calm words and gentle reassurances, Imran's presence continued to cast a long shadow over the cabin. He sat with a defiant smirk, his eyes scanning the crowd as if searching for an ally or a weapon. His earlier outburst had planted seeds of rebellion among some of the more disenchanted passengers, and it was becoming evident that his influence was growing. A few passengers who had silently endured their own long-held grievances began to nod in subtle agreement with his rebellious air. The atmosphere, already charged by the malfunction in the storm outside, was now ripe for a confrontation that could spiral out of control. Aisha returned to the aisle and found herself face-to-face with Imran once again. His eyes burned with a mixture of anger and challenge as he leaned forward, addressing a small group of passengers in hushed yet fervent tones. He spoke of freedom and the stifling nature of enforced order, drawing on the frustrations that many felt in silence. His words, though quiet, had a magnetic pull. They resonated with the passengers who had felt overlooked or constrained by the everyday demands of travel. In his tone lay not only defiance, but an appeal to a desire for change that could threaten the carefully maintained routine that Aisha had worked so diligently to uphold. The captain's voice returned over the intercom, this time with more detailed information. He explained that while the technical glitch was being addressed, the plane would experience a period of unexpected turbulence. The announcement struck a chord of alarm through the cabin. The promise of jostling seats and a rattling cabin was enough to heighten already simmering nerves. For Aisha, it was a double-edged sword. While turbulence could distract from personal conflicts, it also had the potential to shatter any remaining sense of control. Her eyes met Mr. Malik's again, and in that brief exchange, a silent understanding passed between them. This was a moment that demanded unity and strength from everyone on board. As the plane began to shudder under the first signs of turbulence, the cabin's atmosphere shifted from simmering discontent to raw apprehension. Aisha moved with purposeful calm, urging passengers to fasten their seat belts and remain seated. Her voice, steady despite the shaking of the aircraft, tried to weave a thread of reassurance through the growing chaos. But amid the rattling of overhead compartments and the sharp exclamations of startled passengers, a subtle but dangerous transformation was taking place. Imran's defiant presence, now emboldened by the unfolding crisis, became even more pronounced. His eyes glinted with a dangerous mix of opportunity and challenge. As if he sensed that the turbulence was more than just a natural event, it was a chance to tip the balance of power. In a quiet corner of the plane, a subplot began to emerge. A middle-aged woman named Farah, who had sat quietly in the back for most of the flight, revealed herself as a former air marshal with a steely resolve hidden behind gentle eyes. She had been a silent observer until now, but as the turbulence grew fiercer, she stepped forward with a determined look. Farah's presence added a new layer of complexity to the situation. While Aisha had always relied on calm and compassionate authority, Farah represented a more direct, uncompromising approach to security. Her past experiences in handling dangerous situations gave her a confidence that was both reassuring and formidable. Together, Aisha and Farah formed a dual bulwark against the creeping chaos, a blend of empathy and hard-edged resolve. The conflict deepened further when a sudden jolt from the turbulence sent a tray of refreshments crashing to the floor, drawing gasps from the nearby passengers. In that moment of distraction, Imran seized an opportunity. With a quick, almost imperceptible movement, he slipped from his seat and advanced toward the front of the cabin. His goal was clear. He intended to exploit the chaos and assert his will in a way that would leave no doubt about his control over the situation. His steps were measured, his eyes fixed on the service area where the crew struggled to maintain order. The shift was subtle at first, a dangerous ripple beneath the veneer of controlled chaos, but it soon became evident that Imran was setting the stage for something far more significant. Aisha's instinct screamed at her to intervene, but the situation was rapidly evolving beyond a simple matter of personal conflict. The plane was no longer just a vessel in the sky. It had transformed into a microcosm of a larger, more volatile struggle. The technical glitch, the unexpected turbulence, and the rising defiance among the passengers all converged to create an atmosphere where control was slipping away. As Imran moved with determined purpose, his every step was a direct challenge to Aisha's mission of preserving order and safety. She realized that the obstacle before her was not just the unruly behavior of one man, but the risk of an uncontrollable uprising that could endanger everyone on board. In that charged moment, Aisha felt the weight of responsibility pressed down on her more than ever before. She knew that restoring order would require more than just kind words and gentle nudges. It would demand decisive action, and perhaps even a confrontation that she had hoped to avoid. Her eyes met Farah's, and in that brief connection, the two women silently agreed on the next steps. Aisha's soft authority would have to be backed by Farah's forceful presence if they were to counter the rising tide of rebellion. Outside, the storm continued to rage, its relentless energy echoing the turmoil within the cabin. Each flash of lightning illuminated the faces of the passengers, faces etched with fear, determination, and in some, a dangerous glimmer of defiance. The world beyond the airplane's windows was as unpredictable as the human hearts within, and every rumble of thunder served as a grim reminder that the fragile balance of order was at risk of being shattered entirely. As the turbulence intensified, Aisha stepped forward with resolve, her voice rising above the din of rattling seats and whispered conspiracies. She addressed the cabin calmly yet firmly, urging everyone to remain seated and to trust that the crew was working to ensure their safety. Yet, even as her words washed over the crowd, Imran's presence loomed large, a dark counterpoint to the order she was trying to impose. His determined gaze, filled with both challenge and anticipation, signaled that the coming moments would test not only her abilities as a caretaker of order, but also her courage in the face of an adversary willing to risk everything for his cause. In that turbulent crucible, as the plane shuddered through patches of violent weather and the passengers braced themselves against the onslaught, the first true obstacle had emerged. Aisha's initial goal of maintaining a safe, orderly journey was now entangled with the broader, more complex struggle between chaos and control, a struggle that would soon demand sacrifices, forge unlikely alliances, and force every soul on board to confront the unpredictable nature of fate. A sudden jolt in the plane's trajectory sent a ripple of panic through the cabin. The turbulent forces outside had escalated into a violent dance of wind and rain, and the interior of the aircraft seemed to vibrate with the tension of lives hanging by a thread. In the midst of this chaos, Aisha's calm was beginning to fracture as she struggled to balance her duty with the mounting emotions around her. As the plane shuddered violently, the intercom crackled with an urgent message from the cockpit. "We are experiencing critical system failures. Please remain seated and secure all personal belongings." In that charged moment, every sound, the metallic groan of stress components, the rhythmic pattern of rain on the fuselage, and the low murmur of distressed whispers merged into a symphony of impending disaster. In the midst of this turmoil, Imran's eyes flashed with an intensity that went beyond mere defiance. He had been a constant thorn in the side of the enforced order, but now, as the plane's fate hung in the balance, his anger transformed into something more raw and desperate. Rising from his seat with a purposeful stride, he began to speak, not as a simple troublemaker, but as a man consumed by a long-held pain. You all think that safety is found in following orders, in trusting this broken system, he shouted over the roar of the engines, his voice trembling with both fury and sorrow. But what happens when that system fails? When the ones meant to protect us only serve to ignore our cries for help? Aisha's heart pounded as she heard the words, each syllable cutting through the chaos like shards of broken glass. The revelation in his tone was more than a rebellious outburst. It was a confession of loss. In a strained voice, Imran continued, I lost someone dear because I believed in that safety. I lost my sister when negligence was dressed up as routine. And now, I refuse to stand by while we all pay the price. His admission, stark and unfiltered, hung in the air like a dark cloud, altering the very texture of the conflict. For a long moment, the cabin fell into a heavy silence as the weight of his words sank in. Farah, who had watched from her quiet corner with the vigilance of a seasoned guardian, stepped forward. Her eyes, steely and unwavering, met Imran's with a mix of accusation and understanding. This isn't just about you or your loss, she said in a low, firm tone. We all have our scars, but tearing apart the fragile order of this flight will endanger every one of us. Her voice was measured, each word deliberate, as she tried to bridge the gap between raw emotion and the need for stability. In that charged atmosphere, Mr. Malik, the elderly gentleman whose calm authority had quietly reassured so many, leaned forward. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of decades of hard-won wisdom. I once worked with the engineers who designed these systems, he confessed. I know that sometimes these failures are not mere accidents, but symptoms of a deeper neglect, a system that prioritizes profit over people. His revelation cast a new light on the unfolding events, suggesting that the crisis was not merely the result of natural forces, but might also be a consequence of deliberate oversight. The cabin, already on edge, now buzzed with whispers of betrayal and systemic failure. Aisha felt a churning conflict within her. The gentle caretaker, who had always relied on order and empathy, now found herself drawn into the vortex of a larger battle, a battle that questioned the very foundations of trust and safety. The symbolism of the raging storm outside was unmistakable. The tempest mirrored the human tumult within, a struggle between the desire for control and the raw need to seek justice for past wounds. The plane's physical boundaries seemed to blur as personal and collective histories intertwined. Imran's eyes, alight with both grief and defiance, searched the faces of those around him. I'm not here to cause chaos for the sake of it, he said, his voice barely rising above the hum of the engines. I'm here because the system that was supposed to protect us has already failed me. I want to take back control, to show that there is another way, a way that cares for every life on board. His words struck a chord with some passengers who had silently borne their own burdens of loss and disillusionment. Aisha took a steadying breath, the air around her thick, with the acrid scent of heated metal and damp fear. The vibration of the engines and the relentless pounding of rain against the windows were like nature's metronome, marking the rapid descent into an uncertain future. Every detail, the dim emergency lights casting eerie shadows on anxious faces, the echo of footsteps in the narrow aisle, the shiver that ran down her spine with each tremor of the aircraft, served as a potent reminder that the stakes had never been higher. Caught in the maelstrom, alliances began to form in unexpected ways. A few passengers, emboldened by Mr. Malik's revelations and moved by Imran's raw honesty, started to murmur in support of his cause. Their eyes flickered with a mix of hope and desperation, a silent acknowledgement that the current order had perhaps abandoned them long ago. Yet, amid this growing sympathy, Farah's unwavering presence was a counterweight to the rising tide. Her firm stance against any reckless takeover reminded everyone that while change was necessary, it could not come at the cost of innocent lives. The conflict reached a fever pitch when the cockpit door, which had remained securely closed until now, swung open with a groan that reverberated through the cabin. The captain's anxious call, "Remain calm. We are trying to regain control," was drowned out by the escalating confrontation. In that moment, the physical barrier between the crew and the passengers became a symbol of the chasm that had formed between those who trusted the system and those who had lost faith in it. Aisha found herself standing at a crossroads. On one side was the familiar path of duty and order, a path that had defined her career and given her life purpose. On the other lay a treacherous road paved with raw, unfiltered emotion. A road that promised reckoning but also threatened to plunge everyone into chaos. The sensory assault was overwhelming. The bitter tang of fear in the air, the oppressive pressure of the storm outside, and the palpable heat of human conflict. Every element conspired to drive the situation toward an irreversible climax. With a voice that wavered between authority and empathy, Aisha stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Imran. "I understand your pain," she said softly, each word heavy with sincerity. "But taking control now, in the midst of this storm, will only bring more harm. We need to find a way to fix the system without endangering all of us." Her plea was both a challenge and an invitation, a call to transform anger into action, to seek justice without sacrificing the fragile order that kept them alive. For a moment, the entire plane seemed to hold its breath. Imran's eyes searched hers, a tempest of conflicting emotions swirling within. The charged silence was punctuated only by the relentless clamor of the storm and the deep, rhythmic hum of the engines. In that suspended heartbeat, every soul on board felt the gravity of the choice before them, a choice that would decide not only the fate of this flight, but also the future of a system that had betrayed their trust. In that pivotal moment, the confrontation was no longer merely about personal vengeance or the desire for control. It had become a profound reckoning, a collision of ideals where the urgent need for change met the imperative of preserving life. The storm outside, with its ceaseless fury and unpredictable power, became a mirror for the human condition. Fragile yet defiant, in constant flux yet yearning for stability. As the plane lurched and the emergency lights flickered, alliances crystallized and new lines were drawn. Aisha, fortified by the support of Mr. Malik and the resolute determination of Farah, resolved to steer the unfolding crisis toward a resolution that honored both justice and safety. Imran, still raw with grief but tempered by the unexpected clarity of shared suffering, hesitated, caught in the dual pull of retribution and the possibility of redemption. In that charged, luminous moment, every sound, every light, and every heartbeat coalesced into a singular truth. The battle for the soul of the flight was a battle for the very essence of humanity itself. The stakes had been irrevocably raised, and the choices made in the next moments would echo far beyond the confines of the storm-lashed cabin. The storm outside roared with renewed ferocity as the plane bucked and shuddered against the relentless wind. Inside, every sound, the clatter of overhead bins, the murmur of frightened whispers, and the steady beeping of emergency alarms, wove together into a tapestry of escalating dread. Aisha's heart pounded in her ears as she moved down the aisle, her eyes darting to every trembling face. The chaos was no longer contained to a single, unruly passenger. It had seeped into every corner of the cabin. The turbulence grew more violent, rattling the structure of the plane until the metallic groans seemed to echo the cries of the anxious passengers. In that moment, the familiar order Aisha had so carefully maintained teetered on the edge of collapse. Just as she reached the center of the aisle, a voice, calm, yet unmistakably different from the captain's earlier announcements, crackled over the intercom. Its tone was measured, almost clinical, but laden with a gravity that chilled her to the bone. "Attention all passengers," the voice began, "this is not an ordinary technical glitch. What you are experiencing is the result of deliberate interference with the aircraft systems. We have reason to believe that this action was taken by individuals with knowledge of our vulnerabilities. For a split second, time seemed to slow as every ear strained to catch the words. The revelation was unexpected, a twist that shattered any semblance of a random accident. The voice continued, "Remain calm. We are working to secure the situation. Further instructions will follow." Aisha felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. The smooth cadence of the unknown speaker's voice contrasted starkly with the panic surging through the cabin. It was as if a hidden hand had reached out to rewrite the fate of everyone on board. Imran, whose defiant glare had grown even more intense moments earlier, now shifted in his seat. His eyes, previously burning with raw anger, flickered with something else, an unreadable mix of determination and uncertainty. In that charged moment, a new obstacle revealed itself. The plane's internal systems began to fail one by one. The soft glow of the cabin lights dimmed and then blinked erratically, casting distorted shadows that danced along the walls. The emergency exit signs flickered, and a low, persistent alarm began to sound, urging passengers to brace themselves. Outside, the unyielding rain hammered the fuselage, the wind's howl nearly drowning out the urgent voices of the crew. Aisha's mind raced as she realized that she now faced not only the challenge of a rebellious passenger and the rising discontent among the travelers, but also a deep-seated conspiracy that threatened the very safety of everyone on board. As she steadied herself, she caught a glimpse of Mr. Malik exchanging a grave look with Farah. In that silent moment, it was clear that they, too, recognized the severity of the situation. Their calm authority, honed by years of experience, now served as a beacon amid the storm of uncertainty. Before Aisha could take another step, the intercom's calm voice returned with a new, chilling announcement. Due to unforeseen system failures and external interference, we are being forced to divert to an alternate airfield. Remain in your seats and await further instructions. The words sent ripples of fear through the cabin. A murmur of discontent mixed with anxiety rippled among the passengers, each person realizing that this flight had transformed into something far more dangerous than a mere technical malfunction. At that precise moment, an unexpected shift occurred. Imran, who had until now seemed content to merely stir the pot of rebellion, suddenly leapt from his seat. With deliberate urgency, he strode toward the cockpit, a path that no one had dared to take. Gasps of disbelief and murmurs of shock exploded around him. Aisha's eyes widened as she watched him vanish behind the closed door, her instinct screaming that this was no ordinary act of defiance. His actions now carried the weight of a coup, an attempt to seize control in the midst of mounting chaos. Simultaneously, Aisha's earpiece, which had been silent throughout the crisis, crackled with an unexpected transmission. In a hushed, urgent tone, a voice she recognized from her early days on the job whispered, "Aisha, listen carefully. There's more to this than you know. Imran's not acting alone. The interference with the systems, this diversion, it was planned. I repeat, it was planned. You need to secure the cabin and prepare for anything. Trust no one until you get further instructions." The message, cryptic yet charged with urgency, sent a fresh surge of adrenaline through her veins. The weight of this revelation was staggering. It wasn't just a technical malfunction or an isolated act of defiance. It was an orchestrated event. The systems had been tampered with deliberately, and Imran's sudden dash toward the cockpit hinted at an underlying plot. His earlier outbursts, his painful words about loss and betrayal, now took on a new, more dangerous significance. Had his personal vendetta been the cover for a larger agenda all along? Aisha's mind reeled as she grappled with the implications. If Imran was part of a coordinated effort, then the balance of power on the plane was shifting rapidly. The steady calm that had once defined her approach was giving way to a turbulent mix of doubt and determination. She looked to Farah, whose eyes, fierce and unyielding, now burned with an intensity that spoke of readiness to fight. Mr. Malik's calm presence, too, seemed to harbor secrets of a past where trust and betrayal had danced hand in hand. The cabin itself became a crucible of heightened emotions. Passengers, once content to remain silent in their seats, now whispered fervent theories and shared terrified glances. The very air vibrated with uncertainty and fear. Every flash of lightning outside illuminated faces etched with apprehension, while the relentless roar of the engines served as a grim reminder that they were all hurtling through a storm, both literal and metaphorical. In the midst of this upheaval, Aisha realized that the challenges she faced were multiplying by the minute. Not only did she have to contend with the physical dangers of a failing aircraft and violent turbulence, but now she also had to navigate a labyrinth of human motives and hidden alliances. The unexpected twist, the revelation that the crisis had been engineered, had turned her world upside down. Her initial mission to maintain calm and order was now complicated by the need to unmask the conspiracy and protect innocent lives. With every step she took down the narrow aisle, Aisha sensed that time was slipping away. The intercom remained silent after that last ominous message, as if the orchestrators of this chaos were waiting to see how the passengers would react. The flickering lights and the intermittent hum of failing systems added a surreal, almost dreamlike quality to the unfolding events. Every heartbeat seemed to echo the uncertainty of the future. Then, as if to punctuate the gravity of the moment, the cockpit door swung open once more, revealing a figure clad in a dark uniform. It was one of the pilots, but there was something different in his demeanor, a calculated calm that contrasted sharply with the panic behind him. He stepped into the cabin slowly, his eyes scanning the crowd as if he were assessing an enemy camp rather than comforting frightened passengers. His presence was a stark reminder that the chain of command had been broken and that the stakes were now higher than ever. Aisha's pulse raced as she moved toward the pilot, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. The pilot's measured tone broke through the cacophony. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are aware of the situation. I assure you, we are doing everything possible to restore control." But his words rang hollow to many in the cabin. The tension was palpable, a fragile piece that threatened to shatter at any moment. In that electric moment of uncertainty, Aisha's inner resolve hardened. She knew that her next actions would determine not only her fate, but that of every person on board. The unexpected twist had changed the trajectory of the flight. What began as a routine duty had transformed into a high-stakes battle against hidden forces intent on exploiting the chaos. Every second mattered now. As the pilot retreated back into the cockpit, leaving the passengers to the tumultuous silence, Aisha took a deep breath and addressed the cabin in a clear, unwavering voice. "I need everyone to stay calm and follow instructions. We will get through this together." Her words, filled with both empathy and determination, were an attempt to reforge the fragile bonds of trust among the passengers. Yet even as she spoke, her eyes met those of Imran, whose earlier defiant glare had softened into a complex mix of remorse and resolve. In that fleeting glance, it became clear that the lines between friend and foe were blurring. The man who had threatened to seize control might, in fact, hold the key to unraveling the conspiracy or to plunging them all into further chaos. Outside, the storm continued its unyielding assault on the plane, a relentless metaphor for the turmoil within. The sudden twist, the revelation of deliberate sabotage, and the shifting loyalties among the passengers had set the stage for a confrontation that would leave no one unchanged. Every sensory detail, the bitter tang of fear in the recycled air, the dissonant clamor of systems on the brink of collapse, the stark flash of lightning that illuminated the determined faces, spoke of a battle not just for control of the aircraft, but for the very soul of those on board. In that charged moment, as the plane hurtled toward an uncertain fate and alliances shifted like the turbulent winds outside, Aisha knew that the challenges ahead were greater than ever before. The unexpected twist had rewritten the rules of the game, forcing her to confront not only a physical crisis, but also the dark undercurrents of betrayal and ambition that threatened to tear apart the fragile fabric of order. With unwavering determination, she steeled herself for the coming storm, ready to face mounting challenges, to uncover the truth behind the sabotage, and to protect the lives entrusted to her care, even if it meant venturing into the heart of chaos itself. The storm reached its peak as the plane lurched violently in the dark sky. Outside, sheets of rain blurred the view, and lightning illuminated the turbulent clouds in jagged bursts. Inside the cabin, every face was etched with terror and resolve. The failing systems cast eerie, flickering shadows on the walls, while alarms wailed intermittently, creating a discordant symphony that matched the rising heartbeat of every passenger. Aisha moved swiftly through the narrow aisle, her determined eyes fixed ahead despite the chaos. She could feel the tremor of the aircraft beneath her feet and the cold sweat on her brow, but her focus was unyielding. Every step she took was a defiant act of courage against the relentless storm of uncertainty. At that moment, she knew that the fate of everyone on board rested on her ability to restore order and prevent further disaster. Near the cockpit, Imran's presence loomed like a dark shadow. Earlier, he had tried to seize control of the flight, and now his footsteps echoed in the confined space as he advanced with a mix of anger and desperation. His face, usually so hardened and defiant, now bore the marks of inner conflict. The earlier sparks of rebellion had ignited into something more complex, and his eyes, reflecting flashes of regret and determination, met Aisha's in a silent exchange. They both understood that this confrontation was inevitable and that every decision made in the next few moments would have irreversible consequences. The cockpit door swung open with a resonant thud, revealing a small space bathed in the intermittent glow of warning lights. Aisha stepped inside, her gaze immediately falling on the control panel where the instruments flickered erratically. In that confined space, the mechanical beeps and the soft hum of the failing system served as a grim reminder of how fragile their situation had become. The tension was palpable, each second stretching longer than the last as the storm outside mirrored the battle unfolding within. Aisha's voice, steady and resolute, broke the heavy silence. "Imran, step away from the controls," she commanded, her tone both gentle and unyielding. The words hung in the air as he hesitated, his eyes darting between the blinking gauges and Aisha's determined expression. For a moment, the chaos seemed to pause, a fragile lull in the storm, before Imran's jaw tightened and he took a step forward. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out toward a panel, and in that instant the full weight of his inner turmoil became clear. The sound of the storm outside intensified, as if nature itself was urging a climax to this human conflict. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and then closer, as if echoing the clash of wills inside the cockpit. The flashing lights painted both Aisha and Imran in stark, shifting hues, emphasizing every line of worry, every gesture of defiance. Aisha's heart pounded as she realized that the sabotage was deeper than she had imagined. It was no longer just about an act of rebellion, but a calculated interference that threatened to bring the entire flight crashing down. As the plane shuddered and the controls sparked with erratic energy, Aisha reached out and firmly grasped Imran's wrist. His resistance was fierce, but she held on, her grip a symbol of her unwavering duty to protect the lives aboard. "We must work together," she said, her voice softening even as her eyes burned with determination. "This isn't just about you or your anger. It's about every life on this plane." For a long, charged moment, the only sound was the relentless pounding of the rain against the fuselage and the labored breathing of the two figures locked in this dangerous embrace. Imran's eyes flashed with a torrent of emotions, rage, sorrow, and a haunting vulnerability that he had long tried to hide. In that brief, intense instant, the layers of his defiance peeled away to reveal a man broken by loss and betrayal. The revelation was a silent confession, one that resonated with Aisha and gave her a glimpse into the darkness that had driven him to this point. Yet, even as understanding flickered between them, the danger remained acute. The interference with the aircraft systems was not an accident, it was deliberate, and it threatened to escalate into a catastrophe. Aisha felt a surge of clarity. She knew that to save the flight, she had to disarm the chaos, not only on the control panel, but also within Imran himself. "Listen to me," she said firmly, her voice echoing in the confined space. "I know you've been hurt. I know you feel betrayed. But if you let your pain control you, we will all suffer." Her words were both an appeal and a challenge, a call for him to let go of the urge for vengeance and instead join forces to undo the sabotage that was endangering everyone. For a heartbeat, the storm inside and out converged into a singular, overwhelming moment. The control panel's lights flickered wildly, and the sound of the engines throbbed like a distant drum, marking the cadence of impending doom. Imran's grip on the panel loosened ever so slightly, as if he were on the brink of surrendering to reason. In that critical pause, Aisha saw the possibility of redemption, not just for Imran, but for them all. She reached deeper, her hand steady as she guided his fingers away from the dangerous controls. Suddenly, a violent jolt shook the cockpit, throwing both of them against the wall. The force of the turbulence was deafening, a physical manifestation of the turmoil within. In that instant of chaos, the sabotage triggered a cascade of failures. The instruments went dark, and a piercing alarm signaled that the aircraft was now in critical danger. The world outside the cockpit dissolved into a blur of rain and darkness, while inside, the air crackled with the tension of a battle that had reached its zenith. Aisha's mind raced as she recalibrated the situation. The controls needed immediate attention to stabilize the flight, and every second counted. She turned to Imran, her voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. "Help me, Imran. We can fix this together." Her plea was both urgent and compassionate, a recognition that despite everything, he was still the key to preventing disaster. In his eyes, she saw a flicker of the man he once was, a man driven by a desire to protect and not destroy. With trembling hands, Imran nodded. Together, they began a frenzied effort to bypass the sabotaged circuits. Aisha's fingers danced over the buttons and switches as she followed the rapid instructions in her mind, her every sense heightened by the stakes. Imran worked alongside her, his own actions now guided by a desperate need for redemption rather than rebellion. The cockpit became a theater of high stakes, where every touch on a panel and every flick of a switch carried the weight of lives lost and saved. Outside, the turbulence slowly began to ease, as if the storm were yielding to the collective will of those fighting to keep hope alive. The alarms quieted, and one by one, the instruments flickered back to life. The aircraft, battered but not broken, steadied its course through the dissipating tempest. In that triumphant, heart-stopping moment, Aisha and Imran shared a glance, a silent acknowledgement that they had crossed a threshold from chaos to fragile order. The tension in the cockpit gave way to an overwhelming sense of relief, yet the scars of the ordeal remained. The crisis had brought to the surface long-buried wounds and forced both of them to confront the darkness that had driven their actions. For Aisha, the battle was not merely about regaining control of the aircraft, it was about restoring faith in a system that had failed so many. For Imran, it was a chance to transform his pain into purpose, to finally find a way to honor the memory of those he had lost without succumbing to bitterness. As the storm outside faded into a gentle drizzle and the plane resumed a steady flight path, the cabin slowly filled with the murmurs of passengers who felt the tension ebb away. The harsh glow of the emergency lights softened into a warm, steady illumination that seemed to promise a new beginning. In the cockpit, Aisha exhaled slowly, her eyes still locked on Imran, who now looked more like a man on the path to redemption than a rebel consumed by anger. The crisis had reached its zenith and then ebbed into a calm that was hard-won and uncertain. The sabotaged systems were now under control, and the diversion had been called off as the aircraft reconnected with its original flight plan. Yet, the impact of the events that had unfolded would linger long after the storm had passed. In that high, harrowing moment, the true nature of the conflict had been revealed, not just between authority and defiance, but within each soul grappling with loss, betrayal, and the hope. Every heartbeat, every breath, resonated with the memory of the struggle. And as Aisha and Imran continued to work side by side, the once clear lines of enmity began to blur. In the crucible of the storm, the unlikely alliance had not only saved the flight, but had also forged a new understanding between two very different hearts. In the wake of the calamity, hope had emerged from the darkness, a promise that even in the midst of overwhelming chaos, the human spirit could find a way to restore order, heal wounds, and rise again. The turbulence slowly gave way to a steadier hum as the aircraft emerged from the worst of the storm. Outside, the dark clouds began to break apart, revealing a faint glimmer of dawn that promised a new day. Inside, the cabin was quieter now, a subdued calm replacing the earlier cacophony of alarms and panicked whispers. Aisha, still catching her breath from the intense struggle in the cockpit, stood at the threshold between the now silent control room and the aisle where the passengers sat, their eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and lingering uncertainty. In the soft, amber glow of the emergency lights, Aisha surveyed the faces before her. Some showed signs of exhaustion and shock, while others wore expressions of cautious hope. The immediate threat had been overcome, yet the aftermath was etched in every weary smile and hesitant glance. She felt the weight of the day in her bones, the responsibility of every life aboard, the scars of conflict, and the fragile trust that had been rebuilt amid chaos. Imran, his features still shadowed with regret and resolve, lingered near the cockpit door. The earlier fire in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by a thoughtful quietness. He had returned to his seat, not out of submission, but with a burden of understanding that now tied him to Aisha and everyone on board. Their earlier confrontation had been brutal and raw, but it had also unearthed a truth that neither could ignore. That pain, when left unchecked, could lead to destruction, yet when shared, might pave the way to redemption. Their silent exchange in that moment spoke of hard-won lessons and the possibility of a new beginning, even if it was shrouded in lingering uncertainty. Mr. Malik, who had been a steady pillar of quiet strength throughout the ordeal, now offered gentle reassurances to those nearby. His soft-spoken words and kindly eyes reminded everyone that life was a tapestry of trials and small triumphs. Farah, too, moved among the passengers with a subtle authority that conveyed both safety and empathy. She exchanged nods and brief smiles with Aisha, silently acknowledging that together they had navigated a moment that could have shattered lives. The technical failures, deliberate acts of sabotage, and the near takeover of the flight had all left an indelible mark. Slowly, the cabin began to fill with murmurs of tentative conversation as passengers processed what had happened. Aisha made her way back down the aisle, stopping occasionally to offer a few comforting words or a reassuring smile. The echoes of earlier tensions had not completely vanished, but a sense of cautious calm prevailed, a fragile peace built on the promise of survival and the shared experience of adversity. As the aircraft resumed a steady course toward its original destination, the intercom crackled once more. The captain's voice, now calm and measured, explained that the sabotage had been contained and that the flight would continue safely. His words, though meant to reassure, carried an undercurrent of unresolved mystery. There was an acknowledgement that while this crisis had been averted, the questions of who was behind the interference and why remained unanswered. The ambiguity of that message hung in the air, encouraging passengers to reflect on the vulnerabilities of the systems they trusted so implicitly. In a quiet corner near the back of the cabin, Aisha found a moment of solitude as she sat for a brief rest. The events of the past hours played back in her mind like a stormy film, sharp flashes of lightning illuminating the faces of those who had fought, pleaded, and ultimately cooperated to save the flight. Her thoughts turned inward. For so long, she had defined herself by her duty to maintain order, to be calm in the storm. Now, however, she realized that true strength lay not only in enforcing discipline, but also in embracing the messy, often painful complexities of human emotion. The day had forced her to confront her own limitations and to see that even in moments of absolute chaos, there was room for empathy and growth. Across the aisle, Imran stared out the window at the dissipating storm. In the reflection of the receding darkness, he saw not only the angry, rebellious man he had once been, but also hints of vulnerability and the possibility of change. The memories of his past, losses that had hardened his heart, mingled with the new understanding that his anger might be redirected toward healing rather than harm. He recalled Aisha's firm yet compassionate voice urging him to work together, and in that memory lay the seed of a different future, one where his pain could become a bridge to connect with others rather than a barrier that isolated him further. As the flight neared its destination, the cabin slowly transformed into a space of quiet introspection. The adrenaline of crisis had faded, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with reflection and a subtle, unspoken hope. Passengers exchanged glances that spoke of shared hardship and of a silent bond forged in the face of danger. Some lingered in whispered conversations, trying to piece together the enigmatic nature of the sabotage, while others simply rested, absorbing the enormity of what they had experienced. Aisha rejoined the main aisle and took one last look around, the faces of those she had cared for during the flight, each one touched by fear, courage, and the resilience of the human spirit stirred something deep within her. She knew that her role was not merely to enforce rules, but to be a guide through the unpredictable storms of life. That day, her journey had taken her beyond the confines of duty into the realm of emotional reckoning. The challenge had been immense, and though the physical danger was now behind them, the implications of what had transpired would resonate long after the passengers had disembarked. In the final moments before landing, as the plane descended through thinning clouds, the cabin's lights were adjusted to a softer glow. A hush fell over the space as the aircraft touched down, the wheels kissing the runway with a gentle finality that marked the end of a tumultuous chapter. The landing was smooth, a testament to the collective efforts of those who had fought to keep the flight on course. Aisha felt a profound sense of relief, mixed with a bittersweet awareness that every ending was also a beginning. After the plane came to a complete stop and the passengers began to file out in subdued clusters, Aisha lingered in the now quiet aisle. She exchanged a few final words with Farah, whose steady gaze conveyed both exhaustion and pride. Imran, too, offered a nod, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared and the transformative power of confronting one's own demons. The questions surrounding the deliberate sabotage and the broader conspiracy were not fully resolved. They would continue to haunt the edges of every conversation and every thought. Yet, in that unresolved mystery lay a call for vigilance and introspection, a reminder that the systems we depend on are as fragile as the human spirit itself. As the passengers dispersed into the cool morning air, leaving behind the claustrophobic confines of the airplane, Aisha took a deep breath and allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The journey had been one of conflict, loss, and unexpected alliances, but it had also revealed that even in the darkest moments, there was potential for change. The scars of the past would not simply vanish, but they could serve as lessons, a roadmap for a future where empathy and resilience might triumph over anger and despair. In the gentle bustle of the arrival terminal, as loved ones greeted returning travelers and strangers exchanged fleeting smiles of solidarity, the echoes of the night's events lingered like a half-remembered dream. There was no grand declaration of victory, no sweeping statement that all was well. Instead, there was a shared, unspoken understanding that the flight had been a microcosm of life itself, fraught with unexpected twists, heartbreaking losses, and the possibility of renewal. Aisha's journey had reached a point of closure, yet the themes of trust, betrayal, and redemption continued to resonate, inviting everyone to ponder the delicate balance between order and chaos. Even as she prepared to leave the terminal and step back into the world outside, Aisha carried with her the memory of that stormy night. A reminder that sometimes the most profound battles are fought not on open fields or in the skies, but within the confines of our own hearts. The resolution was not absolute, leaving space for lingering questions and the hope that someday the mysteries might be unraveled. For now, though, she allowed herself to cherish the fragile peace that had been won, A peace born of shared struggle, hard-earned understanding, and the ever-present possibility that from even the darkest night, a new dawn could emerge. If you found this story powerful, make sure to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Your support helps us bring more important stories to light.